Many content creators have already created videos about this topic, including Ben Hedges and Ask Sebi, and while those videos are great, I haven't necessarily seen one that encompasses everybody in the credit card game, no matter what path in the credit card game they want to take. So in this video, I'm going to be covering the first 5 credit cards you should get, whether you're trying to get the absolute maximum value from the credit card game, you're on Team Travel but aren't partial to Chase, or you're on Team Cashback. Before we start, of course, I have to caveat this by saying that there are so many different combinations of cards that you could have for these first 5 credit cards, but this is just my opinion on a few of the most optimal paths you can take to get the maximum value you can from your credit cards. And in addition to that, please keep in mind that these card setups that we're building here today may take more than just a year or two to build. So make sure you just keep in mind the rules that these lenders have, especially if they're a little bit strict on getting back-to-back credit cards with them, like Capital One is, for example. We do have about 15 or so cards to cover here, so I am going to be zooming through them a little bit quickly. So let's go ahead and just dive into it with path number 1, which I would call the Chase path. Before we even get into the credit cards that make up this path, why exactly would you want to go down this route in particular? And that's because this is theoretically the most effective and profitable way to play the credit card game, considering Chase's 524 rule. This rule states that if you've opened 5 or more personal credit cards in the past 24 months, Chase will automatically deny you for your next credit card application with them. So out of our first 5 credit cards, you technically would want all of those to be Chase cards, especially if you're getting them within 24 months of each other. As for the first card in the Chase path, I would either recommend the Chase Freedom Student or the Discover It secured card. Obviously, since we're more Chase focused here, I would definitely recommend the Chase Freedom Student if you are a college student. And the reason for that is because down the line, you could product change this Chase Freedom Student into a Chase Freedom Flex card, which provides you even more value. And you'll be able to start your relationship with Chase as early as you possibly could, which is obviously going to be good in helping you get approved for their other cards down the line. Now, this card isn't going to get you a ton. It's just going to give you 1x back on everything and a $50 welcome bonus, which is pretty nice. But like I said, we're really just getting this card to kick off our credit card journey, as well as get our foot in the door with Chase as early as possible. But if you aren't a student and you could not get approved for the Chase Freedom Student card, then I would probably recommend the Discover It secured card. And the main difference between a secured card and a normal credit card is that the credit limit on a secured card is determined by what deposit you put down at the time of you being approved for that secured card. Now, the Discover It secured card is going to give you a little bit better perks than the Chase Freedom Student does. It'll give you 2% back at grocery stores and at gas stations, and that's up to $1,000 per quarter, and then 1% back on everything else after that, as well as a welcome bonus that will double all the earnings you made in the first year at the end of that first year, which is pretty awesome. After 6 to 12 months of using this card, you should get graduated up to the normal Discover It cashback card, which is much better. It gives you 5% back on rotating quarterly categories, as well as 1% back on everything else. And it also comes with that same welcome offer of doubling all of the cashback you earned in year 1 if you were to apply fresh for this card, but obviously you won't get that if you're just graduated up to it. The Discover It cashback card itself is a little bit harder to get approved for right off the bat, which is why I recommended that you get started with the secured card first. But you could always check Discover's pre-approval tool on their website to see if you were pre-approved for the normal card, and you could go ahead and skip that secured card step. I should mention that this recommendation for a first credit card, basically throughout all the setups we're talking about here today, could vastly change depending on what comes out of the Chase Freedom Rise card. Considering most people think that the Chase Freedom Rise will be a credit builder card, if you are watching this at a later date, I'd definitely do some more research to see if there's any new starter cards out there, but at the time of recording this, these are the 2 options I'd recommend. Also remember that if you are added as an authorized user to one of your parents' cards and you actually do already have a credit score, then you could probably skip this step altogether and just jump into some more higher tier cards. But this recommendation is for people who are literally starting from scratch. Card number 2 along the Chase path is going to be the Chase Freedom Unlimited. It's important to note that Chase usually does not approve people for any of their credit cards besides maybe the Chase Freedom Student and Chase Slate Edge, unless they have about a year of credit history under their belt. So that's why it's important that we got started with the Chase Freedom Student first if we were in college, because hopefully we went ahead and did that in branch and have a relationship with a banker. And that would help us be able to speed up this process a little bit, not have to wait a full year after getting that first card to get the Chase Freedom Unlimited. But this credit card will serve as your catch-all credit card, since it gives you at least 1.5x on every single purchase. Plus it comes with some other earning categories like 5x back on travel booked through Chase's Ultimate Rewards portal, 3x back on dining, and 3x back on drugstores. Also, this card does come with a great welcome offer right now of $200 back after spending $500 in the first 3 months of having it, plus 5% back at grocery stores for the first year of having this card. I believe that's only up to $6,000 worth of spend, but still a nice perk nonetheless. Also, this welcome bonus does come at you in the form of 20,000 Chase Ultimate Rewards points, which can actually be valued at a lot higher than just $200 if you use the next card in combination with this one. that being the Chase Sapphire Preferred. This card is a beginner travel credit card in Chase's ecosystem, and you may be wondering, why would I recommend a card right now with a $95 annual fee this early on into the game? And that is because Chase has a rule where you can only get one of their Sapphire card bonuses, either on the Chase Sapphire Preferred or its bigger brother, the Chase Sapphire Reserve, with a $550 annual fee every 48 months. So of course we want to go ahead and start that clock as soon as possible if we can. Now, without going into a ton of detail on each of these cards, just know that this card is going to be used to increase the value of all of your other Chase points. I say that because it gives you a 25% boost on all of your points whenever you book travel through Chase's Ultimate Rewards portal, and it actually allows you to transfer all of your points out to travel partners, where you can conservatively estimate your points to be worth at least 2 cents per point. Technically, yes, it can also be used in other categories like the 3x back it gives you on streaming services and online grocery store purchases, as well as 2x on just miscellaneous travel. But like I said, it's mainly going to be used to increase the value of our points whenever we go to redeem them, and also start that Sapphire clock as early as possible. Plus, right now it is coming with a limited time welcome offer of 90,000 Chase Ultimate Rewards points after spending $4,000 in the first 3 months of having it. And while that is an in-branch only offer right now, I have heard that it's coming online pretty soon, so get prepared for that. And also be sure to check the links down in my description to find the highest public welcome offers available for any of the cards we talk about here today. The fourth card in this Chase path is going to be an option between two cards, that either being the Chase Freedom Flex or one of Chase's co-branded cards. Now, the reason I give you an option here is because depending on what spending habits you have will determine what card you should probably get next. Now, that first option, the Chase Freedom Flex, everything about this card is pretty much the same, including the welcome bonus and the earning categories, as the Chase Freedom Unlimited, but instead of that 1.5x on the everything else category that the Chase Freedom Unlimited gives you, this card gives you 1x back on everything else, but also gives you 5x back on rotating quarterly categories that Chase offers. Now, the key here though is that the 5x rotating quarterly categories are only up to $1,500 worth of spend per quarter. So I'd only apply for the Chase Freedom Flex now if you are going to be consistently spending more than $1,500 per quarter in those categories. That may sound weird because we don't even have another card that gives us those 5x rotating quarterly categories, so why do I even say that? The reason for that is because at this point, you should definitely be able to product change your Chase Freedom student card, if you started with that one, into a Chase Freedom Flex. So the only reason I'd apply for it fresh is, I guess, one, if you wanted to get the welcome bonus on it, but also only if you are spending more than $1,500 per quarter, because you don't really need 2 Chase Freedom Flex cards if you're not spending more than that. So if you're just going to use that product change Chase Freedom Flex as this fourth card, you're going to need another card to fill this slot, and in that case, I'd go with one of Chase's co-branded cards. The most popular of which would probably be the Chase World of Hyatt card, because while it does have a $95 annual fee, it does give you 1 free night at a Hyatt hotel every year. You could also go with one of the United cards if you fly really frequently with them, or if you're a frequent Southwest flyer, then I would recommend getting the Southwest Priority card. And the reason I go with that one in particular is because while it is the highest annual fee Southwest card that they offer, it's also the easiest one to get the most positive value out of, so it's kind of a no-brainer if you're going with Southwest in particular. As for card number 5 in this Chase path, I would either now go with one of the co-branded cards if you got 2 Chase Freedom Flexes, or I'd go with the Built MasterCard here actually. Now just remember that this is going to be your 5th card as part of that Chase 524 rule, assuming you applied for all of these within 24 months of each other. So you definitely want to add in another Chase co-branded card or any Chase card that you really want before going on to other lenders. And one co-branded card we didn't talk about before is actually the Amazon Prime Visa card. But the reason I don't necessarily think that you have to apply for it now is because we've seen a lot of data points of people getting approved for that card while over 524. So personally, I wouldn't stress too much about this, but if you feel safer about it, then maybe you go ahead and add the Amazon Prime card now instead of any other cards. However, if you are done with Chase cards and you're ready to move on to another lender, I'd probably recommend actually getting the Built MasterCard here, and there's really one main reason for that. Built is the only credit card out there right now that offers you the ability to earn any rewards back on rent, and although it's only 1x back on rent, that still could be a good amount of points every year you're earning. And the reason it plays so well hand in hand with Chase's cards is because one of its biggest transfer partners is Hyatt. Now, if you remember from earlier, Hyatt is one of Chase's travel partners, so you could technically actually use Built points in combination with Chase points to book Hyatt trips if that's something you're interested in. Also, Wells Fargo is a little bit sensitive to recent hard inquiries or number of accounts open, so adding them in this 5th card slot isn't really a bad idea. But this last card is going to fill more of a flex spot, so if you do have some Chase co-branded cards that you still want to add, I'd add it while you're under 524, of course, but if not and you're ready to move on, then maybe you go over to Built or just another lender. But now let's move on to the second path, which I will call the travel path, but without Chase. Now for this first card slot, I would recommend picking up the Discover It secured card or another secured card with a lender that you're a fan of. Without recommending any Chase cards for this whole category, I would say that the Discover It card is one of the ones that you can get the most value from, especially in year 1, so you might as well add it here if you don't have any other secured cards you're interested in. Just please don't get stuck on this first card too much, because at the end of the day, as long as it does not have an annual fee and is going to help you build credit in order for you to be able to get approved for higher tier credit cards down the line, that's really all that matters. Just remember here that getting started is much better than being perfect. As for the second card you're going to add add to this setup though, I would actually recommend the Citi Double Cash. If you're on Team Travel and you're not focused on Chase cards, you really only have a couple other lenders that are worth going for, that being Citi and Capital One. And since Capital One doesn't have a great catch-all credit card, I would definitely recommend getting the Citi Double Cash here because it's a very simple card that gives you 2x back on every single purchase, and it allows you to accumulate Citi's thank you points, which can actually be redeemed for even more value down the line with another card we'll talk about later. This card does require you to have at least a good credit score of about 670 to 700 before you're approved for this card, so just be aware you may have to use that starter card for a while until you build that credit history to get approved for any other cards. The one downside with this card is that it usually does not come with a welcome bonus, but at the end of the day, it's still a very simple, easy to use 2% card that will give you a lot of value, especially in combination with the card we'll talk about later, as I mentioned. Card number 3, I'm going to give you two options once again. It's going to be either the Citi Custom Cash or the Capital One Saver One card. At this point, if you're going to go down the Citi only route, I would definitely recommend getting the Citi Custom Cash because it's another great no annual fee card, and this time it gives you 5x back on your highest eligible spend category every single month, up to $500 worth of spend. So getting this card to use in one category and one category only makes a ton of sense to give you 5x back in one of those pesky categories that your other cards won't cover. And of course, you're also going to be earning some more Citi thank you points, which will come in handy for the next card. But at the same time, if you're somebody that's interested in other lenders and want access to multiple different ecosystems, then I would actually recommend getting the Capital One Saver One here instead. Now, this is the Saver One version, the one with no annual fee. And the reason I think it's so valuable to add in this slot is because it gives you access to a ton of different 3x categories. The points that you earn here can be redeemed for cashback, but since this is a travel focused setup, I would recommend holding on to those points, and you'll see why in just a little bit. The Saver One also has a welcome bonus of $200 after spending $500 in the first 3 months, and the Custom Cash will give you the same $200 for spending $1,500 in the first 6 months of holding it. Both of these bonuses are going to be awarded to you in point form again, so now we need to make sure that we can increase the value of those points. And how do we do that? Well, we need a couple more cards. And that leads us perfectly into card number 4, which is going to be the Citi Premier card. Now, this card is going to be what brings alive all of your Citi thank you points because it grants you access to Citi's travel partners and gives you the ability to transfer your points out to those travel partners to raise the value of your points to closer to 2 cents per point on average, rather than just 1 cent per point that you would have gotten before without this card. This card's also going to give you access to a lot of 3x categories, which will either complement the Saver One very well in the categories that it doesn't cover, or it's going to become one of the cards that you spend a lot of money on if you went the Citi only route. Not to mention, right now, this card is coming with an elevated 75,000 point welcome offer after spending $4,000 in the first 3 months. Plus, right now, it gives you 10x back whenever you book travel through Citi's new travel portal, so it's definitely a good time to hop on it. And once again, be sure to check the links down below if you want to see the highest public welcome offer at the time of you watching this video, but I imagine it's elevated right now because they're about to release their Strata line of cards, which we don't exactly know what they'll be yet. And speaking of the Strata cards, maybe when they come out, they actually fit this card number 4 slot better in this setup. I really obviously just don't know yet because we don't know what the cards are, but just another point of emphasis here to make sure you do your own research on these cards before you go and apply for them yourself. Moving on to card number 5 though, in this slot, I'd either get a co-branded card with Citi or the Capital One Venture X. At this point, you've either built out a really solid Citi only setup or you've built out a solid Citi and Capital One hybrid setup. If you went with only Citi, then I'd probably recommend looking into their co-branded cards at this point because you obviously like their ecosystem and their cards in general. And funny enough, right now, one of Citi's most popular co-branded credit cards, being the American Airlines Platinum Select World Elite MasterCard, is actually coming with a limited time 75,000 mile welcome offer after spending $3,500 in the first 4 months of having this card. But if you're somebody that doesn't want to have an annual fee airline dedicated card, then maybe you'd add a different co-branded card here, or you go ahead and add something like the Built MasterCard if you're just sticking with that Citi route. The Built MasterCard could actually be pretty nice here too because it does have American Airlines as one of its transfer partners, so it can be used as a pseudo travel card. But if you went the hybrid approach with Citi and Capital One credit cards, I'd highly recommend getting the Venture X in this 5th card slot. Not only will you be able to get 75,000 miles right now after spending $4,000 in the first 3 months for their welcome bonus, but you're also going to get a lot of other travel related benefits that help to offset that $395 annual fee that comes on it. On top of that, you can now transfer all of your Saver One miles from your Saver One card to the Capital One Venture X and then transfer those out through travel partners to get that increased value that we talked about earlier. So at this point, if you went with the hybrid approach, you'd have a pretty killer duo in the Capital One Saver One and Venture X. And on the other side as well, you'd have a really nice duo in the Citi Double Cash as well as the Citi Premier card. So honestly, that's a really nice setup if you don't like Chase's cards. So if you're blacklisted by them or something for some reason, then this is probably what I'd recommend going with. Also, I've made plenty of videos about the Venture X at this point, so if you're more curious about that card, then go ahead and watch those videos after this one. But now it's time to discuss that third path, which is one I don't necessarily talk about as much on my channel, but that would be the Cashback Path. Now, cashback setups are actually really fun to think about because you can basically piece together cards from any lender out there since you're not really loyal to one in particular. So this was more of a thought experiment for me me to see what cashback setup I would personally want to run, but there is really a ton of combinations you can make with cashback credit cards. As for card number 1 in this setup, I would definitely recommend getting started with the Discover It secured card or the Discover It cashback if you can skip that secured step. Now, there's not really much to add here that we haven't talked about already, but I think in a cashback only setup, it makes a lot of sense to get the Discover It secured, mainly because once it does get graduated up to the Discover It cashback card, you're not going to have access to multiple different 5x rotating quarterly categories that would really give you value in any credit card setup. As for your second card in your cashback setup, I'd personally recommend getting a 2% card at this point. I'm a fan of adding a catch-all credit card as early as you can into your setup because it then allows you to just accumulate a ton of points for all of your spend rather than just in certain categories. And just know that you really have a ton of options here for 2% credit cards these days, which is awesome because I know it didn't always used to be that way. But some off the top of my mind that you should look at would be the Citi Double Cash, the SoFi credit card, the Apple card if you use Apple Pay, the PayPal card, and even the Chase Freedom Unlimited if you wanted a card that was a catch-all card but also had some added categories. Just remember that the Chase Freedom Unlimited is more than a catch-all card and only gives you 1.5x back compared to the 2x back that all these other cards give you. However, the card that I actually would recommend in this slot, or the one I'd personally pick up, would be the Wells Fargo Active Cash card. This is also a 2% card, but it actually comes with a pretty nice welcome offer, especially right now, of $200 back after spending $500 in the first 3 months. Usually that spending requirement is $1,000, but I guess they cut that in half right now, which is kind of cool. On top of that, it pairs really, really well with the next card we're going to be adding to our setup, and card number 3 is going to be the Wells Fargo Autograph card. Now, this card is a really solid no annual fee cashback credit card that gives you 3x in a bunch of different earning categories, including restaurants, travel, gas, transit, streaming services, and phone plans. I did actually consider going with the Saver One card here in this slot again, but I felt like to avoid overlapping categories, the Wells Fargo Autograph actually had a better appeal to me. This card also comes with a $200 bonus after spending $1,000 in the first 3 months, so there's another added cashback bonus for you. And honestly, this card will just automatically earn its place as being one that comes out of your wallet a lot for a lot of purchases. So now that we have a good amount of categories covered at least 3x, the next card I'd recommend adding is going to be the Citi Custom Cash. You already have a really solid foundation of a cashback credit card setup in the Wells Fargo Duo, but why not at this point add in a flex card that gives you 5x in one category of your choosing? Like I mentioned earlier, the Citi Custom Cash is really just a no-brainer card to give you 5x in that one category of your choice. And in this setup in particular, we don't have a card that covers groceries yet, so you could use this card to cover you for 5x back on groceries up to $500 worth to spend every month, but that is every single month you'll be getting 5x back in that grocery category. On top of that, it also gives you that same $200 offer that we talked about earlier, so another nice addition. As for card number 5 in this cashback setup, there are 2 main credit cards that come to mind for me, that being, once again, the Bilt MasterCard or the Amazon Prime card. In general, this last credit card slot is going to cover one of those other miscellaneous categories you haven't covered yet. And 2 of the main categories that people spend a good amount of money on is, 1, of course, going to be rent if you still rent a place, and 2 would be online purchases. And I know, at least personally for me, Amazon is where I do like all of my online shopping, so this is a pretty good card to slot in that spot. The other nice thing, or maybe not nice thing for certain people about the Bilt MasterCard, is that it does have a relationship with Wells Fargo, so it is going to be simpler in pairing it with that Wells Fargo Duo we talked about earlier. But I also realize that some people do not like Wells Fargo and won't even get any of these cards, which is understandable. Another reason the Amazon Prime card fits so well in this 5th card slot is because that is when you're going to be hitting 524. Like I said earlier, this card does seem to kind of not abide by 524 at all times, but at least you'll have the comfort of knowing that it's not going to affect you if you apply for this as your 5th card and not your 6th or 7th. Really, any specific category card could fit into this 5th card slot, including even something like the Amex Blue Cash Everyday if you just wanted a general online shopping credit card. But the beauty of a cashback setup is you don't really need to think too hard about when you add certain cards because you can just add them from any lender at any given time, basically. Also, I think it's important to note that a lot of people do get a ton of value from credit union cards, and if you're on Team Cashback, you should definitely be looking at credit union cards as well. I just personally don't know enough about credit union cards to be recommending certain ones. I just built this setup with cards that I'm most familiar with, so just take that for what it's worth. As you can tell, I actually did not include any Amex cards besides that quick mention of the Blue Cash Everyday in this entire 15 cards that we just talked about here. And the reason for that is because Amex is way less sensitive to inquiries and number of new accounts opened in recent past compared to other lenders out there. So I'd consider Amex cards to be more late game additions, or at least after the first 5 credit cards you get maybe, because these other lenders have more hard set rules, and I wouldn't want you to get locked out of any other credit card that you might have wanted because you got Amex credit cards right off the bat. I hope this deep dive into all these different credit cards was super valuable to you. And once again, if you do plan on applying for any of these cards soon, be sure to check the links down in my description to find the highest public welcome offer available, as well as help support the channel without any additional cost to you. As always, Odin and I both want to say thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, and we'll catch you guys next time.